Hello, everyone. I'm just going to talk a little briefly about the scientific method, and I'm going to go into further detail about hypothesis writing today. I'm hoping that this might help with the upcoming lab that you're going to be running. So, the scientific method really starts with um, some general observations, perhaps, of the natural world, or perhaps some research on a topic that you find particularly interesting. And from there, some sort of problem might arise that you want to find a solution to, or you have a question about what you are observing or what you have researched. And that problem or question then leads you to developing a hypothesis. So, a testable statement about what you think an outcome is going to be given um, manipulating certain variables. Once you have your hypothesis formulated, you would then try to design an experiment that allows you to figure out what is going to happen. So, to test to see if your hypothesis is correct. Once you have your experiment designed, you would go through and run it and collect your data, whether that be numerical data, also what we call quantitative data, whether that be just observations or watching what's happening. So we call that qualitative data. And you're going to look at all of this data. You're going to really analyze your results in order to figure out how it relates back to your hypothesis, to figure out if you were able to answer your question or to solve your problem. And a lot of the times, before you move past this particular um, spot in the scientific method, you might find yourself going back to doing a little bit more research or developing a new question or trying to solve a new problem. And you might find yourself going round and round in here before then being able to communicate the results of all of this research that you will have done. A lot of the times we look at conclusion statements in this class, which is really wrapping up and summarizing how your hypothesis was supported or refuted, the data that backs that up. If you were doing this um, large scale, you would want to then communicate the results of all of your information. And you could do this in multiple formats through published journal articles, research thesis, through school, maybe studying under a professor. You could do this in front of an audience by giving a presentation. So there's a lot of different ways to conclude and communicate the results of investigations through the scientific method. We will be looking at next really this hypothesis piece. Okay. A lot of the times in our class, you might be given a specific question or problem in which you need to solve. And so we want to work on how do you formulate a hypothesis. Okay. So when thinking about how you would write a hypothesis, it's really important to understand what a hypothesis is. And the idea of a hypothesis is that it is testable. It is a statement that is going to predict an answer to a problem or question, but it also is a testable statement. So it has to be able to be experimented with. And the easiest way to do this is to make sure that we are only manipulating or changing one variable at a time. Okay, and that a lot of other parts of your experiments end up controlled so that you can say for sure whether or not by changing one variable there was a specific effect. So then when we're writing a hypothesis, we follow the if, then, because model. And you may or may not have heard of this before, and that's okay. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what if, then, because model is, and then go through an example with you in the hopes that that will help you write your first hypothesis. So the if is a statement that really helps explain what you are intentionally changing and how you're changing it. So this is the independent variable. So you need to know what variable you are changing and how you're going to change it so that you can write your then statement, which is really about what you're going to be measuring in order to see if there was a change. And we call this the dependent variable. Okay, so the independent variable is part of your if statement and is what is being changed or manipulated. And your dependent variable is part of your then statement and is what is going to, respond to the other variable. So what's going to happen and how may the dependent variable show a change. And the because statement's pretty descriptive in itself. When you say because, it's usually to give a description or reason behind why something has happened. So the because statement in your hypothesis is really expected to explain why you believe the then statement is going to happen, and is usually based on either research that has been done or previous knowledge, maybe through observations that you have had. Okay, so you write your hypothesis as if this variable is changed in this way, then this is the expectation for what is going to happen because of whatever background knowledge you have to support that. So that might seem a little confusing. So I'm going to give you an example now using a little radish seed experiment. Okay, so typically you will see labs written in this kind of way where you have a purpose, right? So the purpose of this lab is going to be to determine if radish seeds will grow taller when placed in a room with or without sunlight. You might also see the purpose written as a specific question, so you could see it written like this instead. What will happen to plant height when radishes are grown in a light or dark room? So from our purpose, whether it is a statement like the first part or whether it's a question, we should be able to pick out the variable that is intentionally being changed, our independent variable, and the variable that is going to be measured or observed in order to see if there is a change. Okay, so in a hypothesis using the if then because format, our independent variable and dependent variable need to be determined first. So if we're trying to figure out what will happen to plant height when radishes are grown in a light or dark room, we would say, well, the independent variable is going to be related to the sunlight. So you're either growing them in sunlight or in a dark room. And then the dependent variable is what are we going to measure or look at to see if there was a change? We're going to be measuring the plant height. Okay, so now we take these two pieces and we put them into our format. The if is all about our independent variable, so it might be written something like this. If radish seeds are planted in a room with either sunlight or darkness, our then statement is going to finish this and describe what we believe will happen to plant height. Then the plants in the light room will grow taller. And then the because piece is about why we believe that, and this should be based in some background knowledge. So we think about because plants need sunlight to produce the nutrients they need to grow. So based on the purpose of this experiment, which was to determine if radish seeds will grow taller when placed in a room with or without sunlight, we have a hypothesis now. If radish seeds are planted in a room with either sunlight or darkness, then the plants in the light room will grow taller because plants need sunlight to produce the nutrients they need to grow. And that, my friends, is one way to represent a hypothesis. I would love to see you, when writing hypotheses, to use the if, then, because format. I would now like you to go and try to write your first hypothesis. Good luck.